morning. It is a bit of a strange Sunday today because, on the one hand, we celebrate a great feast of the Church, the feast of the birth of the Virgin Mary, as we always celebrate on September 8th. But the Gospel reading is not for Panagia because this is also the Sunday before the elevation of the cross. So we read the Gospel reading in expectation and anticipation, to Timius Stavru, tin ύψωση. And we could therefore call it a double feast. Now in September, we begin the new church year with these two feasts, on the 8th and on the 14th, of the Virgin Mary for her birth and of the elevation of the cross. And in this way, as we begin the new church year, we meditate actively on the reality of our salvation, on the practical means by which the Lord accomplished our salvation. The first, the birth of his mother, and the second, the instrument of salvation, the very cross upon which he crucified our sins and death itself and brought to us everlasting life. Therefore, we celebrate today the beginning, the revelation, and the continuation of our salvation. And yet we know what we do with salvation. We receive it with joy, with enthusiasm. When we hear the good news and we comprehend it, our spirits are lifted on high. And then, we have the next day of our lives, and the day after, and the day after. And we find that zeal, that joy, that enthusiasm impossible to sustain. And then we find, perhaps, that we are trying to sustain a feeling of joy and enthusiasm in our hearts. We seek after the places where we experienced that comprehension. The circumstances, we try to repeat them, hoping that we will again have that chill down our spine, that surging of joy, that near experience of tears that comes from a comprehension of the Lord's salvation which he has given to us. But these things cannot be duplicated. And sometimes we even mistake these feelings for the presence of God. And we may say, when we do not feel these things, that God is absent from us. But this is not so. We simply cannot sustain bliss for our entire being, for our entire existence. And then, perhaps frustrated that we cannot duplicate the experience, that we cannot hold on to this resurgent joy, we begin to put on a facade. We begin to pretend that we are happy to be here. We begin to fake it, to put on a show for ourselves, perhaps, or for others. We fall into habits. And what once was a source of joy for us now becomes an empty husk. We are play acting that we love God, because we are trying to hold on to an experience that at this point is not days or weeks or months in the past, but years. An experience that has almost nothing to do with who we have come to be. we try to hold on to things that are good, to make them be always like that. And if they could be so, this would be a good thing for us. But the truth is that we are called to grow, and we are called to change. And the things that brought us joy, that brought tears to our eyes, that made us want to sing and dance and shout when we are 4 years old, do not sustain us when we are 40. What we must learn is that we cannot hold on to the past. We cannot experience God and His presence and His love in the past. We must encounter Him in the present. This is, I think, something of what St. Paul is speaking of when he is talking to the Galatians. That's what I thought. When he is speaking to the Galatians about the question of circumcision, which is again something which was used to hold on to a certain confidence, a degree of certainty that salvation belonged to the Jews. And St. Paul says, circumcision does not matter, and uncircumcision does not matter. What matters is a new creation. We are called to be remade, to be refashioned, to be transformed by the presence of God in our lives now, not yesterday, not last week, last month, last year, last decade. Now, God is present with us. Now, He refashions us. Today is the day of salvation. Not just 2,000 years ago, and a little bit more, when the Virgin Mary was born. Now, today is the day of salvation. And if we hold on to the past, if we try always to repeat and renew the experiences that sustained us before, we will never again taste the fresh joy of encountering God now. Therefore, the Christian life, as we set out on this new year of salvation, the Christian life must always begin for us by being present and honest with ourselves. We must give up pretending to be who we used to be. And we must give up pretending to be who we want to be. We must be who we are, broken as we are, pained and hurt and fearful as we are. We must be as we are and come to the Lord and offer our broken selves to Him and ask Him to save us. Not because He will not do so unless we convince Him to do so by much asking, but because He will not do so unless we want Him to. And this is what we must learn, to yearn for the presence and the salvation of God, however much it requires us to change and to grow. And now, not the experiences of the past, but the presence of God in the present. As we celebrate the birth of Panagia, as we look to the cross held on high as the sign of the Lord's presence with us, as we prepare ourselves to take up the cross and follow the Lord, may we all remember always that it is not yesterday, it is not tomorrow, but today that is the day of salvation. Please stand.